Thanks for joining us on Indivisible. I'm your host, John Stubbins. This is the show where we put God first, faith, family, and country, and we will always tell you the truth. Today, we're going to get into an amazing subject, one that a lot of people want to try to sidesweep or they don't want to talk about because they don't know enough about it. But it's our southern border, and it's human trafficking, it's fentanyl, it's the consequences of those things, and also terrorism. Big news, America. Mike is bringing back the pillow offer for just $29.98. They're the softest pillows. They don't go flat. Wash them and dry them as many times as you like, and they still keep their shape. And they're made in America. Mike is offering his premium My Pillows at his lowest price ever. Queen size for $29.98, regularly $69.98. That's a $40 savings. And king size, only $5 more. Go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code Indivisible for my show. Or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the code Indivisible for my show, and you're going to get huge savings. I can't think of anybody better to bring on than Jaeson Jones. He is a former captain with the Department of Public Safety and also now a correspondent with Newsmax. And we're thrilled to have Jaeson Jones on the show to discuss all kinds of matters, including these, what they mean, and what this means. So I want to turn now to Jaeson. Jaeson, thanks for coming on the show.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Thrilled to have you. Jaeson, we're going to get right to it because I want to talk solutions right out of the gate. But to get the people a sense of what's going on, what is this? Let's talk about this.
Yeah, you bet. Those litter the ground from El Paso out in Big Bend area all the way into Arizona. What you're seeing here is what smugglers and people being trafficked into the country are putting over their tennis shoes so that Border Patrol agents can't read their sign, meaning their footprints in the sand. That's what Border Patrol agents would call that. So this is part of the masking. I picked this up 80 miles into the United States.
Why do you think they do that? Since we're letting them through anywhere, there's a lot of people that we're not catching all of the people that are coming through. Why do you think they do that?
Well, it's a good question. I think that's part of the issue. We look at this border issue as a one-layer immigration issue, right? When really that is one part of the problem. It's one subcomponent. This is to usually help with drug trafficking or human trafficking, other types of crimes that are affecting the American people, but yet are not captured and talked about. And so that's exactly what I do, is I try to illuminate these crimes and then share it, because we have got to look at the border for the way it is today and not for the way we remember it, because the immigration issue is just one piece of the over-indexing crimes affecting the American people today, but all directly linked to that unsecure border.
And do you think, based on your knowledge and what you're seeing at the border, how many people are using these?
Oh, tens of thousands a year.
Okay.
I mean, more.
So they're issuing these out even before they get to the border. They've got them ready.
In Arizona, you actually go to a market before you cross into the United States on the Mexico side, and you buy a backpack. And in that backpack, it has a camouflage hat, camouflage shirt, camouflage pants, matching shoes, including those, and you pay for that up front from the smuggling organizations to help you get it through. And like I say, we got that 80 miles into the U.S. and Arizona.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And these wristbands, I want the American people to see these. Look at these wristbands. I'm going to have Jaeson talk about this and speak to this, because this goes much deeper than you might think. And it also involves tracking money that's sent back home, right, Jaeson?
So what you're holding in your hand is a process for human trafficking. One of the things that happened in fiscal year 21 is that the cartels made a hard adjustment from human smuggling to human trafficking. And let me kind of talk about the difference. Human smuggling is if I was to pay you to move me from point A to point B, but it's voluntary. Human trafficking under debt bondage is where I'm indebted to you. In other words, I need to be moved from point A to point B. Voluntarily, yes, but you're going to charge me an ongoing fee that I can't pay up front. And that's literally what they did this year. And I'll give you a great example. In 2014, to cross the southern border at the river, the cartels and the alien smuggling groups didn't care what country you came from. And they would usually charge about $100 a person. That's what, look, today, if you're a Mexican citizen, $2,500. If you're Central or South American, $3,000. If you are Chinese, $5,000. And if you're from Russia or if you're from the Middle East, $9,000. Well, these migrants don't have the money. And you got to remember, we have apprehended 1.7 million people at your southwest border in just this fiscal year. That is the highest number ever recorded in the fiscal year. So what the cartels did is they created a process. You're holding that now. And if you notice on each one of these bands, each color represents a different alien smuggling organization. We broke this story in February, but you see these numbers right here?
Yes.
All of that is assigned to an individual. If you notice on some of the back of these, they've actually got a name. Here's one, you can see it written.
Sure.
So these folks pay everything they can up front. From there, they agree to what they're going to pay monthly back to the cartels. They're sent into the United States legally under the current immigration rules, whether we agree with it or not. But think of this for a second, John, because here's where we are. Now these people are being sent throughout the country to every community in this country by our government, believing they're doing it under the acts of compassion. But what they don't understand is that they're sending a virus of trafficking like we have never seen before. So now you have people in the country legally, indebted to a criminal organization who should be a terrorist organization for years, if not decades to come. And this is where we are.
There is no excuse for these groups, for these cartels, to not be labeled as terrorist organizations right now. And what's stopping that, I don't know. If it's politics, it needs to stop, America, because this is what's happening. You're talking about children, okay? You're talking about people that have no way. Imagine being in debt. Imagine going across the desert to even be able to get to the point where you can cross the border illegally, by the way. They shouldn't be here in the first place. And then after that perilous journey, which some don't even make because they probably die in the desert, then you're indebted to the cartel. So these people have to sign an agreement after they've given everything they have to get here and then sign their life away while they're instituted into human trafficking. This is what we're talking about. This is sick. This is evil. And we've got to put a stop to this. And it's high time that the American people put pressure, and I mean real pressure. I need you to get up off that couch and do something today to put pressure on your representatives, your congressman, your senator, to insist that we label these organizations down in Mexico as terrorists. It's got to happen. Jason, I want to talk to you because, you know, obviously we see what's happening. We're talking about human trafficking. We're talking about fentanyl. We're talking about heroin. We're talking about murder, okay? I want to talk about solutions because you're a solutions man, and that's what you do. And I want to know, I want the American people to know, what are those solutions? What can they do? What can we do? What can I do? Let's talk this out. Who do we want to talk to? Who should we be talking to?
So the first solution is what you've been talking about, designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. But the question is, what do you get out of that? Does that mean we go to war with them? The answer is no. Here's what it means, is that now we're adding speed to the system and what we call tools of national power. It would surprise your viewers to know that many of the cartels operating in the United States are here legally on visas, because you have to remember, they have money. They can afford to get a visa. So what we have to do is add speed to the system. By designating them as foreign terrorist organizations, you can't be a terrorist in this country. Now we can get them out of the country immediately on that status. Do you understand? You see what I'm getting at?
Yes.
We're putting speed in the system. I'm not investigating them for 2 years. Second, you hear all the time about follow the money investigations, and it sounds sexy. I mean, it sounds right. Here's what they don't talk about, because most of the folks who are on there on national television saying it have never made a money case before. It's still an investigation operating domestically. Outside of our country, if we have the terrorism designation, we can go after their property and their assets and their money real time with speed that we can't under an investigative model. Third and final thing, is that by having them on a terrorism watch list because they're terrorists, now I can limit their mobility globally. And when you limit their mobility, now what are you really doing? You're isolating them to Mexico.
Yes.
You're isolating, you're going after their finances, which is crippling them, and you're using tools of national power to remove them from the nation. Now Mexico can be much more successful in defeating them. So these are processes of policies that we don't think work, we know work. Because when you're fighting dark networks, you have to look at what the network is. Is it a hub, a spoke, a wheel, or a mesh network? And then from there, and that's about as much as I'll go into it, but then from there, you then determine how you're going to go after each node.
Sure.
And that's what success looks like. So that's one. Second, we have to be able to illuminate this problem. Americans would be surprised to know that everything you and I have talked about so far, human smuggling, human trafficking, weapons trafficking, drug trafficking, all the smuggling and trafficking isms, right? They're not captured under the Uniform Crime Report. So the system that the Federal Bureau of Investigation uses in this country was created in 1929 and implemented in 1934. It captures 8 major index crimes. Problem is it doesn't capture anything we've talked about that are transnational in nature. So when I would travel, and I still travel around this country, but when I was still in government before retiring, I would go up to these intelligence agencies, and I won't mention which ones, but they're all the 3-letter outfits that you know. And they would say, Jason, we hear you, but we don't see it in the data. They're not lying. And then you hear from a governor in Texas or a sheriff or a police chief all along the board, and they're screaming, we got problems. For decades, we've been doing this. No one is lying to the American people. The problem is we have an outdated collection system. So we have to fix the Uniform Crime Report. And the newer one called NIBRS that was created in 1984, implemented in 1988. While it captures more, it doesn't show it real time. And when you're working transnational crime, your viewers would be stunned at the level of speed by which these crooks move globally. It's absolutely incredible. So that's what that will get us. Now,
what can be done, real quick, what can be done to bring that up to speed?
Yeah, great question. So exactly what you said. We need our state reps, our governors, our congressmen, and our senators to take action to make the U.S. State Department designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Because the truth is you don't need legislation. That is what the State Department's job is. The problem is they failed the American people for decades on this. They should have done this around 2009 is when the Laws Zetas became so hyper-violent. If they had done it then, we would not be where we are now.
From 1934 to 2009. Wow, it sounded like an adjustment needed to be made a while back.
Well, that's on the data collection, but you're absolutely right, because here's the thing. Once we illuminate this and we're able to collect amongst 18,000 law enforcement agencies 21st century crimes affecting all of the country, that's when the federal agencies will be brought into focus. Because I know Americans are like me. They're frustrated going, why isn't the FBI doing A? Why isn't DEA doing B anymore, right? You hear it all the time.
Right.
The reason is they're out of focus because they're using data that doesn't apply to 21st century problems.
Right.
Now you got to say, why does a guy from Texas know it, right? Why would a captain understand this? Because that's what I did. I ran Cross-Border Operations Center for the state of Texas.
You would know.
When we began collecting data from every agency along that border, we were stunned. And it's how Texas got $2.2 billion for border operations. And now in Operation Lone Star right now, $1.8 billion in funding, because our visibility and our focus is very clear. The problem is the federal agencies are out of focus. And this is how we win, John.
This kind of reminds me, and folks, you guys know we talk about the fatherless issue all the time in America and the ramifications of that. This reminds me also of our courts dealing with visitation rights, okay? Because they're operating on a system that is, 100 years old, okay? That needs to be revisited and revamped because all fathers out there aren't bad fathers, right? You've got good fathers out there and they're paying child support, et cetera. And the law, the way it's been in the court system, just automatically assumes that if the mother and the father separate or they divorce, or even if they're never married, but there's a custody dispute, that automatically the mother gets the child. But that's not always the case. And there are mothers out there, we talk about this all the time, but we've had Melissa Isaac on. There are mothers out there that aren't good mothers. Sure. Okay? So it's exactly, every case is different. And so There are a lot of laws in America that need to be revamped and updated. This is one of them, and this is a crucial one because we're dealing with the border. We're dealing with human trafficking. We're dealing with fentanyl and heroin. We're dealing with murder. What's it going to take? It's like we were talking about the spikes with the school bus when that, when that happened. Now let's take a look. It shouldn't come to that. Let me ask you this, Jason. Is there anybody in particular, we don't have to get into politics side of it, but is there anybody in particular on the Senate side, on the congressional side, that you see that's really doing damage and holding us up in advancing the ball here?
In regards to the terrorism designation? So what has happened is what I can tell you is that so far we have introduced 2 bills through Congressman Chip Roy to designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations because we can't get the State Department to do their job. Every time they hit the House, they're dead on arrival from Nancy Pelosi. That's been one of the stopgaps right there from the get-go. And we've got to get it through because I will tell you, and I mean this, there is no solution to this problem until these cartels are the focus, because that is what the issue is. One of the things that the U.S. government does very well is they attack the symptoms. Everything we've talked about, human trafficking, human smuggling, drug trafficking, and they're failing at everything. But what is the common denominator behind everything we've discussed here today? It is the cartels. They control everything we've talked about, but yet we are doing nothing to go after them. We're doing nothing to crush their labs right now. John, we've had 96,000 overdose deaths in this country from March of 2020 to March of 2021, according to CDC. We have never been here in this country, ever. And if you look at the mega labs that the CJ&G and Sinaloa specifically have produced in Mexico, each one averages between 3 to 7 tons of methamphetamine a week. A week they can produce. We know CJ&G has over 100 labs throughout Mexico. Never mind the pill mills for fentanyl that Sinaloa and others have. So we can't seize our way out of this. And the reason for that is because under the investigative model in the Fourth Amendment in our Constitution, our system moves slow by design. We want it that way. So when we are targeted by our government, we make sure that they do everything correctly, okay? Correct. And what we've been trying to do is arrest and seize our way out of this problem. You can't do it when you're dealing with transnational crime beyond your borders. You have to use the tools of national power. And that's what I'm trying to employ, because if we don't go after these labs, if you think 96,000 overdose deaths are bad in November of 2021, get ready for what 2022 is going to bring. I'll say it right now.
Yes. Look, I think you can see that this is a dire situation, and Jason's laying it out for you. We've got to take action. We've got to put pressure on Congress. Nancy Pelosi has held up so many different things that need to be instituted, that need to be brought into law, that she refuses to take on, except when it benefits her, of course. But it's time that we put pressure on her. These organizations must be labeled as terrorists, and it must happen now. We'll be right back with Jaeson Jones.
Big news, America. Mike is bringing back the pillow offer for just $29.98. They're the softest pillows. They don't go flat. Wash them and dry them as many times as you like, and they still keep their shape. And they're made in America. Mike is offering his premium My Pillows at his lowest price ever. Queen size for $29.98, regularly $69.98. That's a $40 savings. And king size, only $5 more. Go to mypillow.com and enter the promo code INDIVISIBLE for my show. Or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the code INDIVISIBLE for my show, and you're going to get huge savings.
And we're back with Jaeson Jones. Jason, I want to talk about the cartels, get into some specifics about them, and I'll just kind of let you kind of take it over, list them one at a time so that the American people know who they are, maybe what to expect from them, maybe a little background on them so they know who they are. I don't think that gets talked about enough, and I want to address that today so that we can find out who's doing this and who's making people do this and who are killing people in our country. 96,000 deaths, as Jason brought up, from March till this year, March 2020 of this year. This is just inexcusable. We cannot put up with this because those numbers are going to keep growing.
By leaps and bounds. And this is exactly why I've been warning as I have. So when we talk about the cartels, have you noticed I haven't said drug cartels? And the reason for that, John, is because drugs is something they do. It is not what they are anymore. They are into everything. So here's what happened. In 2006, the Calderon administration began to use their military to go after the cartels. And people in our country were stunned because they would say, how could you dare use your military domestically? Because that's something we would never do in the United States. And we kind of put our own view of how we live into the world. But what they didn't realize is that the cartels were adjusting. They were becoming so hyper-violent in Mexico that he had no choice, and their law enforcement were actually working for and with the cartels. So this was the evolution from organized crime into the insurgency, because as soon as they began using their military in 2006, what we saw at our border was stunning. I mean, absolutely stunning. We would have raging gun battles for 6 and 8 hours with everything from light anti-tank weapons, RPGs, hand grenades, military-grade weaponry right on the U.S.-Mexico border. And we were saying, what is happening? And how did this start taking place? Now fast forward to 2009. So really that was the insurgency, as they were fighting back against the government, okay? Now in 2009, what you had happen was another major tripwire missed by the U.S. intelligence agencies. And that is where the Gulf Cartel, also known as Cartel de Golfo, one of the oldest cartels in Mexico, which their constitution is Matamoros, right across from Brownsville, Texas. That cartel had an enforcement wing known as the Los Zetas. The Zetas were former special forces of GAFE who had come to work for Ociel Cardenas, the leader of Cartel de Golfo. When they broke away in 2009, I was a lieutenant in Laredo, their constitution became Nuevo Laredo across the river. And the violence was overwhelming. And what Zetas brought to the cartels was two things. They brought discipline and tradecraft. And before that, you know, if you're going to go do a dope deal with the Gulf and you're going to go buy dope from them, like I used to do in Brownsville, you know, you're going to do a dope deal at 7 o'clock at night. You were lucky if it went at 1 o'clock in the morning, right? That's just because you're on what we used to call doper time. The cartels were totally different. They said they were going to do something, they did it, and they were damn loyal. And it forced every other cartel across Mexico to rise or fall. And that was the transition. Now, 2009, we saw something else. We saw terrorism. That, you may remember the 72 migrants brutally killed in San Fernando. I worked that case. The reason that incident occurred was because the Zetas wanted the government of Mexico to go after the Gulf. So they went into their territory and executed those people who were doing nothing more than trying to make a better life for themselves. You may remember the Allende massacre of 300 men, women, and children, completely killed, chopped up into pieces, and guisoed. An entire town missing. I mean, these are atrocities that should have been addressed and were not. Think of the casino attack in Monterey, where 54 people were killed and died of smoke inhalation of fire after the casino refused to pay the tax, what is known as the piso, to Miguel Trevino at the Zetas. So this was the evolution into terrorism. But again, U.S. intelligence and the government failing to recognize an adjustment. Now look at where we are today. Today, really, it began in 2015. We began to see where the Mexican government would try to conduct operations such as Jalisco, Operation Jalisco, where literally CJ&G shot down the military's helicopters as they were conducting an operation to go after El Mencho, the head of that cartel. Wow. So if you go to 2019, you saw where the government arrested Ovidio Guzman, the son of Chapo Guzman. You may remember that in Culiacan, and the city erupted around him. What most Americans are not aware of is that that cartel actually went to the battalion base, put knives to all of their families, and said, you either release him now or they're all dead. Wow. This is what has happened. So the cartels have truly become a parallel government in Mexico today. And that's where we are. And that's exactly why you hear me saying what the solutions are, but it's also why we are seeing the level of violence on our border. We're seeing the level of infiltration of the cartels into the U.S., killing Americans, and then also the level of overdoses of impacting our nation. There is nothing in the law enforcement toolbox we haven't brought to bear. this is what we have to do to fix it, and that is designate these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations.
Let me ask you this, Jason. What is the role of a group of thugs like MS-13 in all of this? Do they have a role? Do they work alongside these cartels? And what did they bring to bear here in the United States as they're coming across that border?
You know, Mara Salvatruchas, which is what MS really stands for, 13, I had never even heard of them until 2004 when I was an undercover narcotics agent in Brownsville. And they were literally running to us because at the time the Gulf was just slaughtering them like cattle, just killing them dead in Mexico. And that was because they were trying to establish themselves. But the way it works today is that U.S.-based gangs contract with the cartels. And if we were sitting right here with MS-13 or we were here with MA, which is Mexican Mafia, or Tango Blasters, they'll tell you straight out, no, we're not cartel, but we contract with them. We are contractors. That's how they look at it. This is a business organization. And when you think of the term cartel, it's really been bastardized. It just means agreement. And the cartels who have the biggest relationships with the criminal underworld, those become the biggest cartels. And it all comes back to leadership, willing and able to bring in all of the criminal underworld to work together. And that's why there is not one major U.S.-based gang today operating in the United States that is not buying their dope from the Mexican cartels. They have taken over everything. If we go back to the 80s and 90s, you remember when the bikers controlled meth in the United States. All of it is being bought now from the cartels.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about when Castro let all of his worst people come into Miami during the cocaine rage of the 80s down there, and look at all the people that were murdered. I mean, every day it was a slaughterhouse down there. This is very reminiscent of that, but times 100, right? The military in Mexico, obviously, you know that there are members of the police, military, etc., that are inside these cartels. It's got to make it really tough. I mean, obviously on the Mexican people themselves, but what do our intelligence people like yourself? What do you think is the solution to? I guess, what about blowing up these poppy fields? What about taking out these fentanyl factories and these methamphetamine factories? Can we take them out?
Well, the answer is absolutely. But you can't do that until you at least have the terrorism designation, because I can tell you right now, if you don't have that,
you got to have that.
You got to, because the Department of Defense and the attorneys within all of these different intelligence agencies and federal law enforcement agencies, if you're not able to cross those T's and dot those I's on what gives you the authorities of national power, you're never going to be able to do it. But I will also tell you that the way you win is working in collaboration with the Mexican government. There are great people down there. I have worked with them. I have sent them intelligence during my career. And they are willing to fight to the death for their country. Good. The problem is their leadership isn't allowing them. Right now, the AMLO administration, the current president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the president has a strategy of hugs and not bullets. So the units that are able to do this and to fix this problem, like SAMAR, which is basically their Marines, absolutely have the knowledge, have the capability to do what needs to be done. And we saw that under Nieto's administration and the Calderon administration when they were going after the cartels. If you notice now, you see none of that. And the data shows that the current administration absolutely is failing their own people in Mexico because the murders of his citizens are higher than ever before. So we know what works, we know what needs to be done. Problem is they don't have the leadership in Mexico, and I will also tell you the corruption is at the highest levels of the Mexican government. So that's another problem. It's another challenge that we have. But there are good vetted people that the U.S. government has worked with that are absolutely trying to fight for their country, just like so many other countries around the world that have great people.
That was going to be one of my next question was, just the infiltration of these bad actors and what damage they're doing to stopping us from getting this done. It scares me because who do you trust? Like you said, for instance, you've given intelligence to some of these people in the past, and you've got good relationships. Have you ever come across a situation
where someone you thought you could trust stabbed you in the back.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, those are the instances that we want to try obviously limit.
Yeah.
And that's scary.
Well, there are.
Your life's on the line too.
Yeah, but the government agencies of the United States and of Mexico have processes in place to make sure that people are properly vetted, that teams are properly vetted, and I would never go into what those are, to weed that out.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
There are proven processes for that we know are proven that work.
Okay, good.
The problem isn't that, it's leadership to do it. That's the issue. And don't let anybody tell you, like,
okay, no.
We can get it done. I want you to know that. The problem is you got to have people within the DEA's leadership side, within the State Department, where I will tell you right now, the Achilles heel of most of the problem we're having in Mexico lies at the foot of the U.S. State Department.
Anybody in particular at the State Department that
what I would say is the Western Hemisphere leadership. If I had my choice, I'd take a stadium near the State Department, and I would take the leadership of that, I'd put all the media there, and I'd fire them publicly for what they have done to the American people. Failing to designate these cartels is going to go down as one of the biggest failures in American history. And I mean that. I truly do.
I think it's treason.
You cannot have 96,000 overdose deaths in this country directly linked to two cartels specifically and do nothing to fix this problem. It's absolutely shameful. But let me also say, as somebody that has built these programs, who knows exactly what needs to do, that this is absolutely fixable as well. And there are a lot of great people out there, great people within the State Department and within the U.S. intelligence agencies who are begging to be able to do what needs to be done, but there is leadership that won't let them.
Got to have the will. Got to have the will from the people who can give us the power to do it. You can see this runs so deep, and there's so many different components of where this goes, how it's fixable, the problems. Obviously, we talked about the drugs, but as you mentioned, that's not even the real reason that they're doing this. It's much deeper. I want to talk a little bit about the actual. Obviously, the human trafficking is a huge thing, and Trump really worked hard to start to stamp some of that out. But in relation to these drugs, okay, we've got the fentanyl, we've got the methamphetamines, we've got the heroin. Out of those three, it's the fentanyl that's the biggest killer. The synthetic you were mentioning.
The data shows that.
The data is showing that. Is it even close with the others?
Methamphetamine follows it.
How close?
I'm not exactly sure on the percentages, but I can tell you it is very clear that those two are the highest ones that are affecting.
So the heroin's on much further down.
It is. It's much further down. And not only that, think of this, both of those are synthetics and they run hand in hand. Think of George Floyd. He's a great example. Was on both. And what did that do? One is a stimulant. One's bringing the heart rate high up, and then one's a depressant dropping you.
Wow.
So, we know that those two together, which the cartels are putting
deadly.
together.
Got to be deadly.
Absolutely deadly cocktail. We call it polydrug use. And it's a death dose to the body.
How young are we seeing with all these 96,000 deaths? Is there a breakdown of age groups that we're seeing on that?
It's a great question because it is truly the change in what we have never seen before. Because look, American public is tired of talking about this term, the drug war, which I don't believe you go to drug war with your own people. First off, I want to be very clear on that. That should have never been implemented in this issue. But what we see differently today is that this is not an addiction issue. We have young people dying, taking a pill from a friend they got because they want to stay up at night so they can study longer.
Right.
And they think it's just something that was prescribed. Little do they know it was created in a lab in Mexico. If you were to put some of these pills, just so you know, John, if you were to put some of these pills, let's say you put 50 here and 50 here, one from Big Pharma, one from the cartels. Do you know you and I cannot tell the difference? You would not be able to see it. They literally are using industrial grade presses, just like Big Pharma. That's the whole thing.
So when you say you wouldn't be able to tell the difference with the way
visually,
they look.
the visual, the stamping, the way they make them. But inside, that pill may very well be a hot pill because it's made by cartel idiots who don't care and they just keep stamping it. They don't clean the press. So right now, to give you an example,
there's no accountability either. Nobody's going to come back on them. Whereas with us, the Food and Drug Administration. They're going to come back and do something about it, obviously.
Absolutely, but you got to remember, so they're not cleaning these damn presses. And Phoenix DEA is now seeing in their pills that they're analyzing from the cartels, 25% are hot pills, meaning it's a killer dose.
Oh my gosh.
25%.
That's 1 out of every 4.
That's
so
right.
For your
That's
kids, think about this. It's like in a gumball machine. I always use this analogy. If there's poison in a gumball, and there's only 1 in a gumball machine, which is even less odds, right? Would you be willing to put your dime or your quarter into that gumball machine and take the chance that you're going to get the poison for that gumball? Most people would not. Some people would. I know that I wouldn't, and I know Jason wouldn't, if there's 1.001 chance that gumball could have poison in it and kill me. I'm not putting my quarter in the slot.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the change here, because you've got young people who are not addicts. I mean, John, they're not drug addicts.
Like you said, college student, maybe just
that's right.
trying to stay up and study.
These are straight up poisonings that need to be investigated as a murder. This is where we're going.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. And I will tell you, as somebody that works very closely with the families from the Lost Voices of Fentanyl, I have tried to do everything I can to help them and spread their message. The Fentanyl Coalition, I've interviewed moms who've lost their children. This is a game changer. Look, I'm an old narcotics agent. At the core, that's what I am. And I loved that service because I can't stand what drugs do to families.
Sure.
But to see where we have gone now, absolute failures. And take a look here too at the Office of National Drug Control Policy, ONDCP under the presidency. Their job is to understand the changing of the daily tripwires and trends and to address it, right?
Yeah.
We see no change. Since the Obama administration, we have seen from both the left and the right that they went to a prevention and treatment model. Trump continued that prevention and treatment model, and now so has Biden. And it has failed tremendously. That's not a perception. That's not a feeling. When you look at the CDC data and you look at the arc of overdoses, it is stunning. This should be on every news every day in this country. And yet, what initiative do we have to stop it? If I asked you right now, name one initiative, can't do it.
I can't name one. And I think that's probably the one of the most troubling pieces of what we're talking about today, is that there is none. It's really disturbing, Jason. I'm thankful that you were on the front line doing everything in your power to make a difference, because without people like you, we'd be in real trouble right now. I can't even imagine with everything that you're telling me. Just think about this, folks, because Jason really touched on this. The transition here from drug use to poisoning and murder. Think about that. So I guess my question would be, and I would ask, is it possible that they don't want, because if it's not a drug issue, then they're not looking for reoccurring customers. They're looking to kill, to murder, to poison. That means there's no second chance. That means you're out. You're out. You're dead. So if you're dead, you're not going to buy another dose. Do they know that these presses aren't clean? Do they know that it's 1 in every 4 of these pills that are a poison deal? You said they don't care. So do they know? Do they know that? And I guess the next question would be, do they just want us to die? Do they want our kids to die? Is that the plan?
From the cartel standpoint, they don't care. They could care absolutely less. Now, from the U.S. government side, you've got to ask yourself, if prevention and treatment, if you say it slow and like you mean it sounds good, right? But the problem is, here's the problem, and it goes back to what you just said a second ago. You can't treat someone that's dead.
That's right.
There is not preventing a problem that doesn't exist when the child is not addicted, when the person is not addicted.
They're dead.
They're dead. So that's why the whole strategy doesn't work. And tell me how it is that the American taxpayer is spending literally billions in the Office of National Drug Control Policy, from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, now continued through the Biden administration, and no one has changed the strategy when you can look at the data from the CDC and see that the strategy is the worst failure in American history. I'm telling you that based on someone that uses data to drive everything he does overlaid with intelligence. I'm not saying this, I don't care left, right, up, and down. If it works, it works.
Right.
But this isn't working.
No. We've got to get a handle on this, America, or we're going to lose all of our kids eventually, because these pills, they're poison and they're killing our kids. We'll be right back. We've tried so many of Mike's products at MyPillow. Whether it's the Giza Dream Sheets, the MyPillow mattress topper, or whether it's the MyPillow towel sets. Me and my family here at Indivisible, we've tried all of Mike's great products and we just love them. My mom loves her robe. Mark loves the big dog bed for Shakespeare. And my favorite, the moccasins, which are really great for my feet. Save up to 66% off for MyPillow products for you and your family. Go to MyPillow.com and enter the promo code INDIVISIBLE for my show, or call 1-800-716-4639 and give them the promo code INDIVISIBLE for my show. You're going to love it. We're back with Jaeson Jones. Jaeson, I think in closing, we want to cover, what's to come. Who are our allies in this fight? What can the American people do? They're watching. They want to know, what can we do? How can we get involved? How can we fight back? Who can they call if they notice something? What can they do so they don't feel helpless? I don't want to feel helpless. I want to be proactive. And that's why we're here with Jaeson today, by the way. We're being proactive by having Jaeson because he's one of the foremost experts that there is. There might be one or two other people that can maybe match him as far as knowledge and intel, but Jaeson's it. And so we've got to take this information, this knowledge, we've got to put it to use. What can we do? What can the American people do? What do you see?
Yeah. So here's what I think is coming moving forward. When we look at what happened in 2020 under the Trump administration, we had about 1 million apprehensions in 2019. It was his failure, if you remember. Almost 1 million apprehensions at the southwest border. And what that brought us was about 93,000 overdose deaths in 2020. So now let's look at what 2021 has brought us, 1.7 million apprehensions. So what that tells me is that in 2022, I'm expecting the overdose deaths to almost double. So that's using data, historical, based on where we're going. And when you look at the seizure data coming from United States Customs and Border Protection, they have now seized 53% more fentanyl, 11,201 pounds in 2021, compared to in 2020, 4,700 pounds.
Wow.
So it has doubled. And we knew that because the intelligence was showing that it was going to show, but the data now validates it in the seizures as well. So that's where we're going in the overdose deaths. Second is violence at our border. You're going to continue to see that border degrade, and you're going to continue to see more shots fired at U.S. law enforcement. That's one that really bothers me as well, because this is so fixable, it is so addressable. And then the third thing that really bothers me too is this adjustment from human smuggling and human trafficking. Americans are going to start feeling and seeing how more trafficking arrests are taking place in their communities. The house across the street is going to be holding a whole lot of people. It's going to be a stash house. All of a sudden, they've never seen that before. So this is what's going to hit us in 2022 at a level never before seen. And that is what I've been trying to stop. That's where we know we're going. It's not a perception. You can watch what we call the tripwires and triggers. Sure. And we've been setting those tripwires or watching the tripwires and then setting these triggers, and I can tell you when every one of them is going off, so I know exactly where we're hitting. And it's also why we've been coming out publicly saying we've got to change what we're doing.
Sure.
And it will happen. I said this in 2018, it hit in 2019. I said in 2019 that in 2020 it was going to be bad, and I was absolutely right. And you can see it and I'm saying it again, and we're going to be right because we're doing everything wrong. And the final thing that we've got to do right now is change the perception to the world. The world is under the belief that if you come to the United States, you're going to make it. The reason is because the administration has put that out. If that doesn't change, if you think it's bad right now apprehending people from 151 different countries and 1.7 million, we've still got 3 years to go.
Those are the only numbers we know of.
Well, that's the apprehension number.
Right.
That's right. Never
Right.
mind what we don't know, right?
Right.
So we have got to change the administration's policies, and they've got to make some hard adjustments, because you are going to see crime go up in your communities like we've never seen before. And you watch. I'm right on this. This is what my job was for the state of Texas, was to understand what the tripwires were and to make sure leadership understood what was coming. That was my role, and I'm telling you what's coming for the country.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that bothers me really, probably at near the top of the list, because we know that people in this administration want this Marxist movement to succeed, and to the BLM thing, the Antifa thing. When you're bailing people out, when you're defunding the police, when you're sending that kind of a message that it's okay to assault law enforcement, you're sending a message to that community, no matter where it is. Blue state, doesn't matter, blue city. But I'm telling you right now that it's just my belief, and I think a lot of American people would agree with me on this. These Marxists, they want it to burn. They want it to burn. They want to head down that road. So to a lot of these people, they're probably thinking, this is great. They love this. They're thinking anarchy, okay? These are Saul Alinsky tactics. These are stealth jihad tactics. These are, depending on your ideology or where you're coming from, Marxist, CCP, it doesn't matter. A lot of these people, they want it to burn. And so when you're dealing with someone like that, that's a wild card, because they don't want what you and I want, which is to live in peace and harmony and have a community with our kids being able to go to school in safety and not have to worry about this nonsense. But it is what it is, and that's where we're here. So we've got people blocking it, and the people that tend to be blocking it seem to be aligned with the same people that are bailing people out, okay, that are burning down police precincts or committing assault on police officers or looting, or, I mean, I can go on and on. Everybody knows. We watched it for over 250 days last summer, and people weren't prosecuted. And then you look at a city like New York, where the defunding of police happened, where you look at the fact that certain they had, I can't remember what their special task unit, they took them apart to deal with specific street crimes and things like that. You can't do that and then hope to succeed in this kind of a war with the situation that they're putting us in.
Well, and look at what's coming right now. You know, today they're reporting that 10,000, and you can't have this, 10,000 New York police officers are about to be removed from the job for not being vaccinated.
After what they've already done.
And now look at what's happening to the United States Customs and Border Protection, who are already being overrun at your southwest border. Literally starting November 9th, I don't know if your viewers are aware or not, but CBP's disciplinary action to remove people from federal service begins for the men and women of U.S. Customs and Border Protection who have not taken the vaccine. You are looking to lose 3,000 to 5,000 nationwide in the next 30 days.
And we cannot afford that. We can't lose one man.
So when I tell you what I am forecasting is coming, I am doing that looking at the data daily, at the totality of the circumstances of what is happening, understanding very clearly how the cartel's operating, and watching crime escalate throughout the country. It is very clear where we're going. All you have to do is look at it every day the way I do. And you know, it's unfortunate, but it's why we're trying to illuminate these things, because the more we illuminate it to the American people about what's happening is how we're going to illuminate it.
Who are some of the allies in our fight that we need to get on board with that the American people can call? Who just name a few.
Yeah, Congressman Chip Roy has been a real partner in this. Senator Cruz is also trying to do some good things there as well. For me, it's not a left or right. There is a Democratic congressman who tried to designate the cartels out of New York, and I can't remember, it started with a B. I can't remember his last name.
That's okay.
I actually reached out to him and tried to get it to support his endeavor, and they were stunned when I called. They thought I was kidding them.
Okay.
So his bill was actually one of the best I'd seen, to be quite frank. Again, dead on arrival. So what we have to do, and look,
Pelosi's stopping it.
Pelosi is stopping. That's right. But one of the things we have to do, I've briefed many congressmen, I've briefed many senators and state reps. One of the things that I do now that I've learned that may stun you is that before I brief them now, the very first question I ask is, when was the last time you were briefed, either classified or unclassified, on the Mexican cartels? And you would be stunned. I've had one just one that said, you know, I did get a briefing from a guy who hadn't worked on the border in 10 years, but I did get one. What I'm learned is that it's a lack of communication between government agencies, our leaders, and that I realize that most of the intelligence they're getting is from the news.
That's
So
insane.
it's where we are, and we got to be very open and honest and start really looking at these cartels for what they're doing and impacting our country, and make sure that our leaders are briefed, because if we hold them accountable, that's where we're going to make the change.
Do you believe that there are politicians, and it doesn't matter left, right, middle, doesn't matter. Do you believe that there are politicians that want this Marxist movement to succeed and to take over our country, no matter how that's achieved, even if it's killing our kids? Do you believe that they would take it that far to allow it to burn?
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't do the political thing, right? I don't know where they sit on this issue or that. You know, people ask me all the time, as someone that reports on the borders every day that are degrading, you know, how could people go believe that, you know, this is the route that we should be under? And I don't know what they're thinking, you know, but I can tell you this, that where we are going is a very dangerous place.
Yes.
And every reasonable and prudent American, I believe, believes that too, who sees what's happening and is monitoring it, because we're going in a bad direction. Let's just talk about New York for a second. I don't like that city. I love New York. I do. And I'm a Texas guy.
I went to school there.
I love New York, and I do. And that city, we can remember when there were 2,200 murders in that city a year, when we called it the Dirty Apple. Under Ray Kelly, someone who I believe was the finest commissioner in New York and leader in law enforcement's history in the country, he brought that down to less than 350 sustained. John, that's
phenomenal.
We loved the city at that time. The world did, right?
Sure.
Now look at where we're going. Listen, we have the recipe to fix crime. We know what needs to be done.
Yes.
The problem is we're not doing it anymore. And we got to be very realistic. We got to hold these DAs accountable who aren't prosecuting. We got to start doing what we know needs to be done.
And this is the part that's tough, because I know you're not politically engaged as far as that goes, and I don't want to get into politics either. I will just say this, and I don't know why it's like this, but there seems to be a different opinion on the left versus the right on crime. And I don't get that. I will never get that. But if we don't get a handle on this, our cities, especially these blue cities, they're going to be overrun with crime. You're talking, they're already sanctuary cities. We already know about the murders, the riots, all the, like I said, I alluded to the 250 days last year. But on top of that, I think that we have to understand that if you don't hold people accountable, I guess is what I'm getting to. If you don't hold people accountable for their actions, I don't care if it's theft. I mean, I've seen 100 videos in the last probably 3 months at least where people are going into a CVS or they're going into, now I saw one a couple weeks ago where they went into a mall. Okay, not just a little strip mall, but I mean a physical mall that you have to walk in the corridors and go into the middle of the thing, and to go all the way into the center of a mall that you'd have to if you're going to steal something, you have to run out. The chances of you getting away are nil. They go into a jewelry store area where there's cases out front in a mall. It's like that all over America. They break the cases. They steal the loot. There's like 7 guys. Next thing you know, they're around the corner. You would have never seen, I mean, the audacity, the gall to do that there, okay? A strip mall is one thing. You can pull your car up to a strip mall, get out, run in, and go. You can't do that with a regular mall where you have to park, get out, walk probably a couple hundred yards to even get into the mall. So it's where we've come compared to where, so there's no consequences. When you assault a police officer, when you do drugs, when you kill someone, there's no consequences anymore. You burn down a police precinct, no consequence. When you loot Gucci, when you loot Nike, when you loot Rolex, I mean, think about it. These are people pulling up in brand new Cadillacs that are stealing Gucci's and brand new Nikes and Rolexes. I mean, everybody knows Rolex $50,000 watch, $30,000, whatever. If there's no consequences and you're defunding police, and you don't want people to pay for crimes, what message does that send to the public?
Absolutely. And, you know, look, as somebody that has gone to a home and told their mother or father that their son or daughter is never coming home, you want to be impacted in your life. You want to be humbled in your life. Try doing that.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as somebody that has done it countless times, it really sits with you. And if you ever wonder what a rape victim looks like who's hemorrhaging in a hospital when you walk in, and how that person is absolutely destroyed by what happened to them, and then to see, you know, their assailant only get a few years for those crimes.
Or nothing.
Or nothing. This is where I go back to that you can't say crime doesn't matter, because without safety, we can't prosper as a nation.
No.
And it is something we have to take serious. It's something that's absolutely fixable. But we have to recognize, too, that as we have a global economy, we have a global crime problem. Those two intermesh. And we have never taken that on. And so what I'm trying to do is build in the policies and the processes to make our nation be able to do exactly that. And when we do these things that I've talked about, not only will we have accountability, because we'll be able to see it in the data who's failing, we'll also be in focus to know who to go after with the policies to do so.
And have consequences.
That's right. That's how you win.
Consequences. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
Great to be with you.
I really
Thanks,
appreciate
Brad.
you joining
Absolutely.
us. Folks, you can see that this problem isn't going away, but we have to deal with it now. It's here on your plate. It's at your front door. If you don't deal with it now, you're going to find out the hard way of what the consequences are. We talk about the consequences all the time, regardless of what the issue is. It doesn't have, it could be Afghanistan, it could be critical race theory, it could be China. This is a specific problem that is right at our border. So there's no evading it. There's no ocean between. So you're going to have to deal with it, whether you like it or not, or there's going to be consequences for each of us. And I just want to thank Jason again for coming on and giving us information that we can use, that not only use but understand, so that you can know what things like these mean. You know, children coming over here that are not only trafficked but tagged and indebted to these cartels, probably for the rest of their life. And then on top of that, your kids right here in America, that this is coming for them, your grandkids. We talk about this all the time. You better wake up, America, because it's at your doorstep, like I said. God bless you, and God bless America. We'll see you next time.